everyone. Welcome to the Psychohealthology Summit 2018. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Dr. Eva Detko, and my guest for this session is Dr. Meg Hayward. Dr. Meg is no stranger to overcoming some of the worst scenarios life can throw at us, and she will actually share her story with us and how she's overcome her challenges. And over the last 2 decades, Dr. Meg has helped thousands of others to get well with holistic wellness programs, a podcast series, blogs, online forums, a radio show, 6 published books in cooking and self-help, and also as a celebrity chef and food coach, and as a chief instructor at Whole Foods Market. So she's been busy indeed. Dr. Meg has been featured on NBC Nightly News, the LA Times, Huffington Post, a number of wellness events as well. And she's the founder of Lightning Women, a movement for women abuse survivors with chronic illness. So Dr. Meg, welcome to the Psychohealthology Summit. It's just delightful to have you with us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Eva.
You had some challenges in life and you've got quite a story, really. And so I always find that it's helpful for people to know that even though things happen in life, we are able to overcome it. And so you are one of the super examples of that. So do you mind actually sharing your story? I think everybody will find it really interesting.
I've been through a lot of different things in my life, but very early on, I drowned when I was 2. I was sexually abused as a child by a number of people. By the time I was in my 20s, I ended up with over a dozen illnesses. So including, irritable bowel syndrome and ulcers and migraines. And, my body was reflecting all of the emotional fallout from all of the traumas. I eventually developed fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, and mixed connective tissue disease. And then I was struck by lightning. That's the name for Lightning Women, for abuse survivors. So with each challenge that I had, the first thing I did, and this is the first thing I tell people to do, is to make the decision that you're going to step outside of the victim place and you're going to overcome it. And when you make that decision with every cell, atom, and molecule of your body, that's when things change, because everything shows up that you need for that to happen next. So, but yeah, my story was definitely long and difficult, and but I think it made me stronger to be able to help other people and be able to understand people more deeply.
Yeah, I think like many others and many people I've spoken to, and that includes myself, you've turned those challenges into a life purpose, and now it's your experiences are serving others, and so that's quite powerful in itself. And so what I wanted to ask you, because you said the first step is to step out of the victim mentality. When things happen to us, we often react with the victim mentality. Why me, poor me, all of that sort of thing. Stepping out of that and actually deciding that you're going to be in the position of empowerment and you will overcome it is very important. But I wanted to ask you if there was some sort of maybe specific modalities that you used and worked with in order to help you sort of along in your healing journey?
Yes, absolutely. There were a number of modalities that I've used along the way. I started out with traditional psychotherapy. I was on meds for that, Wellbutrin for like 2 years to help with the depression and the anxiety. But I found that wasn't really working. I found that the drugs just flatlined me. So eventually I found transpersonal psychology, and it's why I ended up getting my PhD in transpersonal, is because that was the thing that really healed me, because it didn't just look at the story and keep me spinning in the story, which is what I felt was happening before. It helped me separate out from the emotions that are at the bottom of the story and what they're thinking, what they're believing, what they're feeling, and the ways that they're running the show unconsciously that we don't even realize, and learning how to release that by engaging love, really, and engaging that to help to heal and to release the physical, mental, and emotional. So it's a holistic process. And it was through the holistic process that I was able to truly get well. That, and also changing my diet and helping to heal my biology. So I was healing the beliefs in my biology, but I was also healing my biology through the plants and herbs and supplements and things that I was using that were from the earth. So it was a real powerful combination.
Yeah. It often is the case that it's never just one thing, isn't it? That particularly with complex trauma, and when you had loads of things going on, it usually helps to sort of approach it from various different angles, and you get that complete toolkit, and then you can really move forward more positively. And obviously your story is one of the many examples that, of course, if you have an emotional trauma, it will sooner or later manifest in the body as a physical illness. And I talk about it a lot, and it's just really why we're doing this whole summit is because we actually specifically talking about this here. If you have a physical illness, there always will be an emotional component, and unless you address and heal that, you will never achieve the optimal health that you desire. So talking sort of along those lines, let's talk a bit more about how emotions can get stuck in the body and manifest as an illness, and how it is really important to release them in order to heal.
Let me talk just a little bit about the ACE study first. The ACE study is the largest public health study ever done here in the United States, and it's adverse childhood experiences. It was something like 70,000 people, and it's an ongoing study. It's been going on for the last 20 years or so. What they've done is they started to link childhood abuse with chronic illness decades later. So most people who went through abuse eventually will manifest some kind of illness, and they linked it to specific illnesses like autoimmune diseases. Fibromyalgia is a big one. That's one of the links that I discovered and was able to heal the emotional piece tied to that, because a lot of fibro patients were also sexual abuse survivors. They've also found that the body holds memory. So if you go through a traumatic experience, your body has a memory of it, and it lodges it in the body. And I've watched this over the last 20 years working with clients, working with myself, is that it gets manifested as emotions, say in your stomach. So if that's your weak point, if that's where, you've got ulcers or you've got bowel issues, there's usually an emotional component that has to do with that. And it usually can be traced back to something that happened when you were quite young. And if they're all different types of traumas, and we all think of them differently, we all store them differently in our bodies. And that's been one of the fascinating things for me to watch, is not everybody stores the same emotion the same way. We're all very unique in how we do that. There's also a concept called the body mind. And the body mind is your body has a mind of its own, basically. And so let me give an example of this. So I knew a woman who had food allergies, and she had been force-fed as a child. And when that would happen, she would cry, she would gag, she would just be in such distress that the body started to perceive a lot of the foods that she was being force-fed as toxic, because the body didn't understand what was happening. It only knew that distress was happening while this food substance was coming into this person's body. So unhinging the emotions is what helped this person to heal. So it's really fascinating, all the different ways that we hold on to emotions, not even realizing that we're doing it, and how we sort of become victim to that until we realize, wait, we don't have to be slave to these emotions and to these patterns, that there's a way out. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about ACEs studies. We talked about this in other sessions at length because it's so important, and recognizing those correlations is just so fundamental. I actually still don't think it's talked about enough, but we're here certainly doing our little bit to bring it out into bring it into people's consciousness and awareness, because it's undeniable that connection exists. And again, if we want to heal and to reach the optimal level of health, this is just something we cannot ignore. Just cannot ignore it. And as you said, there's so many different types of trauma, and there's so many different ways in which people process it, that everybody in a way has got something. You know, some people have sort of had more dramatic things happening perhaps than others, but there are not many people out there who wouldn't have had some level, whether it's attachment trauma or, if you will, developmental, or something like maybe bullying, teasing, being told that they're stupid, not good enough, or whatever else. You know, all of those things can count as traumatic experiences if an individual interprets the situation as a stressful situation, because it's obviously down to this interpretation. And if we're not feeling safe and we're feeling that we actually in this situation tense and stressed, then yes, it registers as a traumatic event, isn't it? So that's, really, really key that people understand it, and they do their best to tap into all of the things that we're presenting here to actually address this fully. But let's talk a little bit more about the victim mentality, which you already mentioned, because people can be in this victim mode and not even realize it. And sometimes you suggest it to people and they'll get defensive about it, but oftentimes you will suggest it to somebody and they will think, am I really doing this? You know, people are just not oftentimes they're not aware that they're doing it, are they?
Yeah, it's so true. And it can be hard to break out of, especially when you have that thought process that where you're just really holding on to that victim space. And it is a hard conversation to have because people get really offended really easily. And I get it. I remember being offended when people told me, yeah, you know, when somebody said life happens for you, this thing happened for you, not to you. And unhinging that was a pretty tough thing to reckon with. And I understand this so deeply and dearly. But this is critical to understand. And because what that does is the power that you're giving. So if you think about this, you're giving power to the experience and to the person who victimized you by living in that space of shame, guilt, anger, resentment, all of those things. You're giving all of your precious energy, your emotional energy over to that experience over and over and over again. And if you can shift those feelings, the shame, the guilt, the blame, the fear, and understand those parts of yourself and why they're there. Because what I found is the shame is there for you. I know it sounds like an odd thing to say, but this is one of the things that I work with people on, is to work directly with the emotion. So shame has something it wants to tell you. It has certain beliefs it's holding. Maybe it's stuck in your stomach. And so you've got all these stomach problems. And you're anxious all the time because you have this anxious part in you that's associated with the shame and the guilt. And so looking at all those parts of the self and giving them a voice, and then doing the process that I do to help them release that is so critical to stepping out of the victim place, because first of all, you're not in the middle of your story. And when I tell people, like, you don't have to relive your whole story over and over and over again when you come to work with me. Some people, I don't even really know exactly what happened with their sexual abuse trauma. What happens is we work directly with those emotions, and then they can see them as sort of a separate entity and not feel so wrapped up in them, because that's what makes the big difference. Is we get really attached. And a lot of the reasons that I think we get attached to these emotions and attached to the victim experience is to protect ourselves from it happening again. It hurts so much. We don't want to go through that again. So we think that we can keep ourselves safe by staying in this small place. Most of us are doing this unconsciously. And it's not until you step out of that small space and really look at shifting your perception from this happened to me to this happened for me. One of my favorite quotes is from the movie Vanilla Sky. And it's, every passing moment is another chance to turn it all around. So what happened to you is something that you have the power to turn around with the help of an experienced guide. This is not something that's easy to do just on your own. And you can turn it around and you can heal yourself. I'm living proof over and over and over again. And the hundreds of people I've worked with over the last 20 years are as well.
That is great, actually. Yes, thank you for that. And yeah, absolutely very valid points there. And I know that you have this sort of approach, a 10-step approach to overcoming victim mentality. So are you okay to talk us through the steps? I think maybe some of them you already got mentioned, but yeah, if we could go through that process, that would be really great.
Yeah, I read a free ebook that's on my website. It's called The 10 Steps to Overcoming the Effects of Victimization. And basically it's the steps to take. And the very first step is to make the decision. It's a little trite, but making a decision that you are going to overcome your illness, you're going to overcome your trauma, you're going to overcome the poor me stance that you might be living in. Making that decision is one of the most powerful things you will ever do. Making that decision with every cell, atom, and molecule of your being is critical. Because then you've said, okay, I'm saying yes to getting better, instead of saying yes to being in this space of illness, the space of fear, the space of sadness or resentment. So that's the first thing. And then what you'll start to do is you'll start to make choices towards that. What's interesting is what you think is a big choice is usually a small one. What you think is a small choice is usually a really big one. So it could be a choice just to make a phone call to talk to an alternative practitioner that a friend keeps telling you all about, So you make that one phone call, and then you keep showing up for yourself. You keep moving forward with each one of your choices with that resolve of the decision that you've made. So I think of it as your lightning power of choice. And just think of it as one choice builds upon the next. It doesn't, even if you see like some sort of a big picture and you're overwhelmed by it and you don't want to do it because you're fearful. And I mean, it's scary to step outside and to speak up and talk about what's happened to you, or to take your talents, your skills, and your abilities and use those to help others. I mean, it can be really, really scary. It's not collecting a paycheck like you used to. So there are all these different ways that we make choices. So after you start making the choices, then I also give you, in the 10 steps to overcoming the effects of victimization, I give you my whole person integration technique. And this is where you'll start to look at the emotions at the bottom of your story, where they're located in your body. You ask very specific questions. That's about 5 of the steps. So I would encourage you to download that on my website, meghayworth.com, and to start looking at those steps. because what you'll look at is the emotion. I find that most people have an overarching emotion that they visit over and over and over again, like sadness, for instance, or anger. So you might have angry selves all over you. And what you'll look at is, what is the angry self thinking and feeling? And you'll look at also other specific questions about how it affects you and how it affects others around you, how it's affecting your body. So you're basically gathering a lot of information and getting to know yourself at such a deep level that you're bringing the unconscious to the conscious awareness. And that's where you get so much power and so much healing.
No, that definitely sounds super helpful, and I encourage people to go and download that ebook for sure. But actually, are you okay to, since we talking and people are obviously here and interested to hear more, are you actually okay to go a little bit more into the whole person integration technique? Because of course, that's a technique that helps abuse survivors and people with long-standing systemic issues. So this could be obviously very, very relevant to a lot of people watching. So if you could give a little bit more information about that, it would be great.
Yeah. So as I started to say just a moment ago, so say your overarching emotion is anger. And that's your go-to. Like, you just get angry, you get pissed off at everything, when something triggers you. So what you'll look at is the situation that just happened. So you're working in the moment. So it's not about going back into your history necessarily, unless that's really up for you. But we'll just stick with the moment that you're in, and you're dealing with anger. You're really angry at your boss because she criticized you in front of a whole group of people. So you start looking at, well, what are the emotions that I'm feeling right now? Okay, I'm angry, I'm disappointed, I'm sad, I'm scared, because people are looking at you differently now, you're all of these things. And you look at the emotion that has the biggest charge for you. And say it was sadness, actually, because your throat gets tight and you start to cry, and so that could be sadness. So you look at that emotion because that's got the biggest charge. So that's the one that's at the forefront. That's the one that's asking for the attention the most. So then you'll close your eyes and take a few deep breaths so that you can really just get centered in yourself and just really be present to what your unconscious mind delivers to you, because you're going to start to get these answers to these questions coming to you that feel like they're coming out of absolutely nowhere, but they're really coming out of your unconscious mind. So here's this emotion. You're going to scan your body. You're going to feel where it is in your body. It's in your throat. Okay. All right. So the emotion is stuck here. It's sadness. And now we're going to ask it specific questions. We're going to ask it, why are you here? And you may suddenly hear something like, to keep you safe. Oh, okay. Because now you're suddenly seeing sadness in a whole different way. It's like, what? Oh, you're here you have a good, nice reason for being here, right? You're trying to help me. Okay, yeah, I get that. Thank you. And then you ask the next question, and that's, what do you believe? And maybe it says something like, no one loves me, no one really cares for me, everybody criticizes me. These kinds of things that are really these blanket statements that really don't define who you are, but the emotion's holding it. It's holding it in your throat. And then you ask it, how do you affect my life? Well, I keep you silent. I keep you from expressing your artistic side, not expressing it because you're afraid of judgment of others. And so you start to put together all of these different themes that have to do with the belief, the feeling, the effect. And then as you start to understand that, and you start to understand that the throat has to do with communication and expression, and not just how you express yourself to not just how you speak, but your personal self-expression. And if an artist is something that you really want to be or you really are, and you're just afraid to come out and be that, this particular emotion of sadness could be the very emotion that's keeping you from being able to put your art out into the world. And, just show it to somebody, show it to a best friend or something, you just kind of keep it hidden. So what I find is then after you information gather and you ask the final question, are you ready to let this go? And most people will say, oh yeah, I get it. I don't need this anymore. Then we bring the love to it. We activate the heart and say, okay, let's just bring love from the heart to it. And then we pull it out of the body and release it, diffuse it into light. And then we go into filling up the space. If you think of it as you as a computer in a way, and you've just deleted a program of sadness that you don't need there anymore. You see how it's blocking your own self-expression. You see how it's blocking you from being the artist that you're meant to be. And now you've got the space available. So what are you going to fill it with? Okay, I'm going to fill it with confidence because I really need the confidence to be able to show people my art, that kind of thing. So, and what I find the coolest part of this, it's not just the process itself, which is pretty amazing to witness with a client, but it's also what happens to the client after the session, is that your triggers begin to diminish and disappear. Things that used to bother you before, your reactions, they don't bother you like they used to. You feel more free. You feel lighter. You feel like you can express these parts of yourself that you weren't able to express before. I love hearing my clients. I always tell them, please tell me your wins as well as the things that are hard for you after the session. One of my clients just said, I just forgave my abuser. Like, out of nowhere. She was like, I never thought I would have compassion for my abuser. And she had developed compassion through the process. And that sounds like, whoa, compassion for what? But these things are possible when you work with these parts of the self and give them the voice that they've always wanted. Because what I found, they want the same thing you do. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be understood. They want to be loved. And they want to be let go. Let them go to be free to be who they are so you can be free to be who you're meant to be. So.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love that. That's really amazing. And it's interesting that you touched on forgiveness, because I actually was going to ask you about this, since, you know, we're dealing with really big traumas here. And if people initially have that approach that something was done to them, and there's sort of somewhere along that process, of course, forgiveness will come into it at some point, one point or another, right? To have that complete freedom. So again, forgiveness is for us, not so much for the abuser. But can you actually elaborate on this a little bit? Because I think some people still do misunderstand forgiveness.
Yes, forgiveness is the most misunderstood action that we can take. And when it comes to our healing, you know, I'm not even going to go into religion because it's really not about that. I like to reframe it. I actually heard this many years ago from Dr. Joan Borisenko. She said, she calls it releaseness. And so it's really releasing the hold that you are now allowing your abuser to have over you, even 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. It's releasing the hold of the emotions, of the resentment, because I can tell you resentment and bitterness are poisonous to the body. And if you're spinning in that resentment and that bitterness and that fear all the time, and this is one of the major links they found to cancer, is long-held resentments and fears. And when you release those, the freedom that's on the other side of that for you is extraordinary. So, but forgiveness really is something you do for yourself. It's releaseness. It's releasing those those emotions, it's just releasing the emotions that have the power over you. And it's the most powerful thing you can do. It does not mean that you will ever trust that person again. It doesn't mean that you need to have that person in your life in any way, shape, or form. If somebody's abusive to you, stand up for yourself and walk away from that. You don't need to be in those types of relationships. Forgiveness isn't about saying it's okay, because it's not okay what an abuser did to you as a child. It's just never going to be okay. But what will shift and change is your relationship to yourself, because it kind of comes down to that. It comes down to self-love, self-care, self-compassion, self-kindness, self-forgiveness. So I think a lot of people get forgiveness and trust really mixed up. And they're two different issues. You may never, ever trust that person again, but you can trust yourself enough to be able to let go of the hold that you have allowed these emotions to have over you and that you've carried in your own body.
Yeah, and it's what's also interesting is that you mentioned self-forgiveness, and in some ways, sometimes self-forgiveness is even harder, isn't it?
Absolutely. I've never met an abuse survivor that didn't struggle with self-forgiveness, because there's always these questions, there's the guilt about, I didn't say no. Why didn't I say no? That was, it's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. And it's also can lead to a low self-esteem and just having low self-respect. And that's really what I think self-forgiveness is about, is raising your self-esteem, raising your self-respect, raising your self-love. I call it your self-love quotient. And you want to just raise that higher and higher. And that's really what this whole process I'm talking about is, a process of self-forgiveness. It's self-releaseness. It's releasing yourself of these toxic emotions that are breaking down your biology. I just can say this from my own experience, is when I saw the difference between who I was 25 years ago and who I am now, and how my body is so healthy. It's so well, yeah, I have issues just like anyone else. But when I think about where I was then and where I am now, the major difference is not just that I've healed these diseases. The major difference is I've healed the emotions at the bottom of the story. The anxiety that I was spinning in every single day. I was anxious. I was fearful. I was jealous. I was judgmental. Oh gosh, I was so judgmental. So it was unhinging all of those emotions. It's really turning self-loathing into self-loving. And that's a road. That's a road to walk, but it's one that's necessary to walk in order to get well, in order to be better and to live the life that you're meant to live.
Yeah, I'm completely 100% relating to what you're saying. It's I think back to myself 20 years ago. Again, I do talk a lot now about emotional toxicity, and for those very reasons, because emotional toxicity does affect our biology, and whether it is as a result of a trauma or just the beliefs that were basically transferred onto us when we were younger, or for whatever other reason, when we kind of stewing in that sort of pot of toxicity emotionally, there is just this that is not, it's going in the opposite direction to where we want to go. We want to go towards health and healing, but that is just taking us further and further away from it. And I would say completely, again, when I'm thinking back to myself 20 years ago, exactly as you said, lots of fear, lots of resentment, lots of judgment, lots of sadness. I mean, honestly, every single negative emotion under the sun, I was burdened with it, and I was carrying it around every single day, and it was working through it and addressing all that actually got me well and got me out of chronic fatigue and out of Hashimoto's. And so, and now that's why we're doing this, because I just want people to understand how important that is. And eventually it is all about, yes, increasing self-love and self-respect and feeling that you're brilliant and wonderful as an individual as you are, without having to meet any conditions. And that's what I always say, so many people put conditions on their own self-worth. And what we're talking about here, it's you're great and wonderful as a human being. And that's it. End of sentence. Not because you do things for other people, not because you please other people or for whatever other conditions people may be putting on it, but just simply because you are. You're a unique individual. There's nobody like you on this planet, and you're a gift, and you need to see yourself as such.
All of these processes are about revealing that uniqueness of you as the individual. And it doesn't mean that you're going to, go out and save the world. It really means you're really saving you. You're really healing you. And in that healing, it heals everyone else around you. It's such a powerful thing. What's more powerful than that in a world that can be pretty toxic and difficult if, you engage in the world in that way?
It's so beautifully said, because oftentimes people think that when we're talking about life purpose, it needs to be big and flamboyant and they need to be super ambitious about it. But actually, it's exactly right. If you heal yourself, if that's your purpose, and if you do this, to the best of your ability and you succeed, then the repercussions of that, it goes far and wide. And if we all heal emotionally, if all the whole planet was healed and got rid of all the emotional toxicity, we wouldn't have any of the big issues that we have globally and on the community level, on the global level, whatever. So I think that's a brilliant way of looking at it. Is that if you just say, I want to heal myself, then you're already having so much positive impact on everybody around you, and that just spreads further and further. Wherever you go, you keep spreading that around, because you're now this content, happy individual full of self-love. And if you have a lot of self-love, you are more understanding. You don't have any of those old resentments and judgments and all of that. So yeah, it just does work that way, that we are all interconnected in the end, aren't we, on this planet? And so you heal yourself and you automatically heal others. And that's really, really wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, I love that concept. I think it was really pioneered by Carl Jung, where he talked about consciousness and that everything has a consciousness. So you look at the collective consciousness, and if you're doing your part within the collective to make this world a better place, it starts with you. It starts on your interior, on how you heal you. And then that spreads out to everyone else. You're raising the consciousness by raising your awareness of you, of who you really are. And I don't think there's anything more powerful than that. And it doesn't mean that, you're going to be happy all the time, your life is perfect, all of that. You still have a dark side. You still have to integrate that. You still have difficult days. You still have people in your life that are difficult relationships. You still have people will pass away. I mean, there's so many different things that we go through in life. But I think it's integrating all those parts and accepting ourselves where we are. And if we're in a stuck place, we have tools, we have ways that we can get out of those spaces and heal ourselves.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you so much. I mean, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for this and for being here and contributing all that you have. And so I wanted to ask, do you have any sort of final top tips for people with autoimmunity who actually want to take their healing to the next level today?
Well, I hope that after hearing this conversation that you're already, that things are already firing in your head about what choices to make, because that's really the top tip, is really making the decision that you're going to heal it, and then what choices am I going to make? There's so much great information all along the way here to help you make choices, to help you feel better. Food, I gotta give a shout out for food, because nutrition is critical in supporting your body to get well. Not just thoughts have frequency, but food has frequency too. And the more you put real food into your body that's whole from the earth without poisons on it, the better it is for your biological system to help heal itself. And do something, just do one thing for yourself today. Just one self-loving act. It can be, go to the mirror, look at yourself and say, I love you. It might be a hard exercise to do, but it's a really powerful one that can really help you. And just keep at it. And another quick thing is list out your qualities, what makes you uniquely you, and start focusing your attention in that arena, because that's where you want to live, right? I mean, don't you want to live in your high quality self rather than living in the toxicity of the fear and the shame and the guilt and the sadness and all those things that get wrapped up, especially for abuse survivors? So which place do you want to live in? I want to live in the perception that I'm a unique and lovely person who's here to make a difference on the planet. And so choose it, you know?
Thank you for that. That's really great to end on. And is there anything else that you want to mention about what you're currently up to? Any work projects coming up? Anything at all?
I have a podcast series on iTunes. I really recommend you go listen to these health and wellness luminaries from all over the world that I've spoken with. Great conversation. It's called Get Well Soon. You can get that on my website at Meg Hayworth, MEGHAWORTH.com. You can download the 10 Steps to Overcoming the Effects of Victimization, my ebook. And then you can also download a free recipe book, 5 anti-inflammatory recipes for people on the go. So it's a whole holistic toolkit that you can get.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much again. Absolute pleasure to talk to you. Really, really enjoyed this conversation. And thank you yet again for being here. It's been absolutely amazing.
You're so welcome.
Thank you very much.